Let's do another Game of Thrones movie fight review. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, scholagladiatoria. So we have previously looked at the Battle of the Bastards. I'll link my previous video below, but a somewhat popular video, and a lot of people when I did that review said, why didn't you review the fight afterwards between Jon and Ramsay? So that's what I'm going to do now. So we know what's happened here in the battle. I'm not going to rehash that. As I say, you can look at the video below, but let's look at the encounter that happens directly after the battle.
We have Winterfell. They don't have a man for siege. All we have to do is wait.
So this is obviously where things really go even more wrong than they already had done for Ramsay. So his whole battle plan had fallen apart at the battle, and so he retreated back to Winterfell, closed the gates and thought, you know, we're fine, we can sustain a siege here. They're not prepared for a siege, and the fact that they've taken huge casualties in this battle, we can sit it out. What he forgot about was Wun Wun the Giant. Now, there's something that I want to say about Wun Wun the Giant. So, as I mentioned in my previous video, my big problem with Wun Wun, first of all, I thought he was fantastically modelled. I thought the CGI was amazing. He looked like a real giant. Someone under the comments previously said, how do you know what a real giant looks like? But, you know, come on. Okay, a giant person. It looks like a genuine, real giant person. And I love the way they did it, but tactically speaking, as someone who doesn't care necessarily about faithfulness to the books or whatever else, I think it was really, really weird and stupid from a military history standpoint that Wun Wun doesn't use any kind of weapon in the battle. We know that the giants use bows, so they can use weapons. You know, they're not stupid. They might not be as clever as other people, but they're not completely stupid. They can use weapons, definitely. There may be something, supposed to be something akin to Neanderthals or something like that. And if they had given him just a large stick, you know, an uprooted tree, let alone, you know, a giant sword or a giant halberd or something like this, then he would have been more effective at killing the enemy. But more important than that, as I mentioned before, they should have given him a shield, okay? Because giving him a shield, he could have even hit people with the shield, but giving him a shield would have made him vastly, vastly more effective in combat. And you know, when you've got something that's such an important weapon as Wun Wun the Giant, you look after it and you give it the best things, the best resources that you possibly can. You don't send a nuclear submarine out to war without putting Tomahawk missiles into it, okay? You give Wun Wun the best weapons you possibly can, best armour you possibly can, and that, if you don't have armour that you can physically put onto him, or that you could strap anything to him and it would function as armour, even bits of wood, you know, tiles off roofs, anything, giving him a shield would have made him vastly, vastly more effective. And what we witness here is the price that Wun Wun pays for Jon not sitting down and thinking, I've got this really useful giant, why don't I give him a shield? And so, yeah, I guess myself, as for many viewers out there, were quite sad at this point. We've grown quite fond of Wun Wun the Giant. He's quite a mascot for the goodies, essentially. And he got full of arrows. Would that bring a giant down? Yeah, I think definitely. We can look at large creatures such as elephants and hippos and things like that, and we know that if you fill them full of arrows, they die. So yeah, that's absolutely realistic. The only thing I would slightly question is about depth of penetration. And those arrows, to me, as someone who's been doing archery and shooting longbows since my teenage years, they don't quite look like they're embedded in him deep enough. However, I would forgive that. I'm not going to make a big point out of that because he is wearing clothing, I won't say armour, but he's wearing a form of thick winter clothing, and we could say that getting through that clothing and getting into his flesh, and the fact that he's probably quite muscular and quite hard, I think the depth of penetration is absolutely fine. But just to reiterate my point, if they had only given him a frickin' shield, or built up his sort of armor or his clothing in some way to make him more invulnerable to things like arrows, then he basically could have won the whole battle and the siege, and a lot less people would have died on Jon Snow's side. So let's carry on and have a little look more at this fight. So this is where we really come down to it. This is the duel between Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton. And it's kind of funny, because so when I did my previous video, I made this big point about why didn't Jon give his men shields? Come on, if he'd just given them shields. It's not difficult to make shields. Every society in the world pretty much has at some point used shields. They're fairly easy to make. They don't necessarily even need to be wood. They can be made of thick leather and hides and things like this. There are many materials you can make shields out of, and for people who don't necessarily have access to armour, or don't have the ability or knowledge how to make armour, or don't have the resources to make armour, shields actually achieve a lot of the objectives of armour for you. And in fact, shields were used even in the periods when really high-tech armour was used, in the 14th and 15th century. Shields were still used at that point. Yes, they were used less by fully armoured men-at-arms, for example, but they were still used by slightly less armoured infantrymen. So shields are incredibly important throughout history, across the world, in almost, I won't say all, but in almost every culture. Now, we have a duel that's fundamentally what Ramsay thinks is his ace card. It's an unmatched duel, isn't it? It's his ability to appeal to Jon Snow's sense of honour and go on, I'll have a duel with you. You've got a long sword and no armour and no shield, and I've got a bow. I'm a good archer. I've just demonstrated that by shooting Wun Wun the giant perfectly in the eye, after about 100 other archers shot him and didn't kill him, and I managed to kill him with one shot. So we know from previous episodes and background that Ramsay is a very good archer and a keen hunter. And so he thinks that he's going to be able to kill Jon Snow. He's lost the battle, he's probably going to lose the siege, and this is probably the end of him, but at least he can take Jon Snow with him, or so he thinks. But of course, this is the point where Jon Snow realises that I should have had a shield all along. And so what does he do? He grabs a shield. Let's have a little look at that.
You suggested one-on-one combat, didn't you? I've reconsidered. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea.
So the whole time that this is going on, I thought it was brilliant. I love the fact that he was like, screw the sword, I'm taking a shield. Although, you have to think, a shield is a one-handed implement. Why did he have to drop his sword to pick up the shield? He could have picked up the shield with one arm and still had a sword in his hand. That's a bit odd. You don't need to hold a shield with two hands to resist the force of an arrow hitting it. Arrows actually don't have an awful lot of momentum. They have a lot of penetrative power, but going into a piece of wood, the wood will absorb most of that momentum. But the one thing that I really thought when I was watching this was, as Jon Snow's advancing, every time an arrow hits the shield, he drops it as he starts advancing, and then every time another arrow is shot, he raises it again. First of all, I thought about this from both perspectives. Number one, I was thinking, Ramsay, shoot him in the legs, shoot him in the legs, shoot Jon Snow in the legs or the crotch. It's not a very big shield. It's big enough to cover Jon Snow's torso, but it's not covering his legs. Ramsay could have aimed low and hobbled him, and we know he's a good shot, so he could definitely put an arrow through Jon Snow's knee, and that would slow him down, I would imagine. But the other point is, why does Jon keep lowering the shield each time? Now, I would say, in fairness to the people who are choreographing this, perhaps, and here's an idea, a way of explaining it, shall we say, perhaps Jon Snow, knowing that he can't cover his entire body and legs with the shield, is raising it up, obviously, to protect himself from the shot at his vital parts, his chest and head, and then he's lowering it as he advances on Ramsay to tempt Ramsay to shoot at the exposed part, and then he's raising it up and catching it again. Now that would be quite clever. I'm not sure that Jon Snow is that clever, but let's just assume, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that that's what he meant to do. Knowing the shield wasn't big enough, he was going, come on, shoot me in the face, shoot me in the face, ha, caught it. Come on, shoot me in the face, shoot me in the face, caught it. And that would make some degree of sense. If he just advanced with the shield up covering himself, he would be better protected in his upper targets, but he'd be exposed in his legs and Ramsay could just shoot him in the legs. So anyway, let's see how it pans out next. So I thought that was great. At last Ramsay gets what is coming to him. And Jon Snow quite correctly used the shield to strike with. It seemed like he struck with the front of it, which would have kind of broken the arrows off on Ramsay. I would suggest if you actually really wanted to hurt someone, it's better to strike them with the edge of the shield, any edge of the shield, top, bottom, front, back, whatever, rather than the flat surface. But nevertheless, he struck him down to the ground, and then, for some bizarre reason, he proceeds to pummel Ramsay with his fists rather than the shield. Now, if you really wanted to incapacitate someone, or even if you just wanted to maim or hurt someone, far better using a lump of wood to hit them with than your fists. The problem with repeatedly punching someone in the head, as we see that Jon does, is you're very likely to mash up your own hands. You might break fingers, dislocate knuckles, break your thumb, all of that kind of stuff. So-called boxers' injuries, Saturday night injuries that A&E in hospitals, ER, in hospitals all over the world see people coming in because they've got in a barroom brawl, punch someone else in the face and they've broken a finger as a result. It happens a lot if you're not wearing boxing gloves, and it's one of the reasons that in traditional pugilism there aren't so many punches to the face as we see with modern boxing with the use of modern boxing gloves. So, I would say Jon would have been far better advised to have just pummeled Ramsay into the floor with the edge of the shield. It would have hurt him more, it would have damaged him more, and it would have spared his hands, which he might need, let's face it, because we don't know what's coming next. But, again, I would caveat that with saying if we want to explain this from the character's perspective, Jon Snow is exceedingly pissed off with Ramsay. And sometimes when you're that pissed off, you don't really think so logically, and you think, I just want to pummel the effing hell out of this person's head with my fists. And that's what you do. So that's how I would explain this scene. It's the unleashing of Jon's rage on Ramsay's head. He doesn't care about that shield anymore. The shield's done its job. He just wants to pummel that guy's head into the floor. And that's what he does. So there we go, what we've all been waiting for, the pummeling of Ramsay Bolton's face into the ground. And it was, a great moment of Game of Thrones. I'm sure anybody who likes the series will absolutely remember that point. Thank you for watching my video. Please, if you haven't already, think about subscribing, hitting that subscribe button. Give me a like, I'd really appreciate it. And if you look in my playlist, you'll see more videos just like this one. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.